telling my mom about her husband's inappropriate comments, now wondering if I caused unnecessary conflict or just did the right thing. My 16F mom got married a few months ago. She's been dating her husband for 3 years before that. My dad died 6 years ago. My mom and I had a talk a couple of weeks ago. She told me she noticed I'd been a bit more distant and she wanted to check in with me because I was never that way. She also mentioned how uncomfortable I look sometimes and how she hates it. She wanted me to tell her anything and said it would mean a lot to her if I could be honest, no matter what. So I was honest with her and admitted that it made me a little sad to see her with her husband, that I'm glad she's happy, and I want that for her. But I can't help feeling sad it's not Dad making her smile and thinking it should be him. I told her it's not a big deal, but it's still an adjustment for me seeing them being all couple vibes. Mom hugged me and told me she was sorry she hadn't checked in with me better on how I was doing with that. I told her it was okay and I loved her. She seemed a little upset, and I reassured her the best I could, so I got another hug. A few days later, my mom's husband approached me and asked me why I had to say that to Mom and whether I was trying to break them up or make Mom feel like she couldn't be affectionate with him around me. He said on top of everything I made her feel like a bad mom. Then he said I was old enough to know there are things you keep to yourself no matter what. He told me he'd tried to step in as a dad, but I clearly hadn't wanted that. So he stepped back. But for me to have an issue with him loving his wife was too much. I could see he was pissed. I sort of knew Mom wouldn't have liked that, but she asked me after noticing some tension in the air, so I told her what he said to me. My mom was so mad at him. They got into a fight. And later my mom's parents got involved in both of them, and my mom's husband told me I shouldn't have told Mom what he said, that it really looked like I was trying to stir up trouble. Next story.
Treating my husband the same way he treated me during my hospital stay, now questioning if my actions were justified or if I went too far. Ida. My husband recently had a kidney stone and 2 trips to the ER. I have had health problems myself and have spent many times in the ER and have been hospitalized too. When I had to go to the ER because I was really sick, throwing up, severe abdominal pain, my husband said I probably just had a stomach bug. He was upset cause he had to get up early in the morning for work. So my father-in-law came to the hospital so I could get a ride home. Before my husband left, the ER doctor came in and said I needed immediate surgery. Turns out I had a bad obstruction. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. During that time, my husband barely came to see me. I asked if he could bring me some soup from the Thai restaurant across the street. Because the food at the hospital was really, really bad, he said no. When he would visit, he would grab the remote and watch one of his news shows. He would also lower the temp in the room to his liking. He could have taken off from work, but he didn't. My father-in-law came to visit almost every day, so when he had a medical issue, I decided that he should be treated the same way he treated me. I went and visited, changed the channel on the TV, played on my phone, etc. Unfortunately, only the nurse could adjust the temp in the room. But I did bring him underwear and socks. He wanted me to bring him food. I said no. He wanted to go to a restaurant on the way home. I said no. Soon as we got home, I changed clothes and then went out with my girlfriends for delayed birthday outing. I spent my birthday with him at the ER. He complained that I was leaving him to go out, but now apparently I'm selfish for treating him this way. During his time in the hospital, not once did I complain to him. I work 2 jobs and I also take classes at the local university. I was able to take off work with no problem and was able to get an extension on my assignments that were due. So Ada, pardon the pun, giving him a taste of his own medicine.
Next story.
Setting boundaries between my daughter and my ex-husband's partner, now wondering if I'm overstepping or simply protecting my child. My ex-husband Dan and I have a 10-year-old daughter, Emily. We divorced 8 years ago after Dan came out as gay, and he effectively left me for one of his friends from work, Jim. They didn't have an affair, but there were definitely feelings there before we separated. They now live together. I remarried 4 years ago to my husband, Nick. Dan and I share custody of Emily pretty much 50/50. One source of tension has been Emily's relationship with Jim. Dan, Nick, and I all come from very conservative Christian backgrounds, whereas Jim is from a very left-wing Jewish-Italian family. Emily has always been something of a free spirit, and she and Jim get on like a house on fire. She and Nick have a good relationship, but Nick is more of a typical stepfather. She respects Nick, but she's obsessed with Jim. She always wants to be doing what he's doing. She's developed a bad habit of walking around the house without shoes or socks because he does. She only eats her eggs hard-boiled because that's how he eats them. She always talks about how funny he is. I had to put my foot down last year when she started calling Dan and Jim her dads, but didn't call Nick her dad. That all came to a head last month when she came home from a week at theirs and proudly showed us some of the Italian that Jim has been teaching her. It turns out that she asked him to teach her Yiddish and Italian. I asked her why, and she said that not only was it fun to have secret conversations with Jim, she was the only child who could carry it on. So this really annoyed me because she isn't Jim's child and she doesn't have an ancestral language to carry on. Our family only speaks English and always has. I also felt like this made her relationship with Nick even more unequal as he doesn't have another language to teach her and bond with her over. I immediately phoned Dan and expressed that I felt Jim was stepping over the line and getting too involved. Dan got uncharacteristically angry at me. He said that if I had a problem with Emily being closer to Jim than Nick, then it was up to Nick to build up his relationship with Emily, not up to Jim to tear his down. I said that Nick couldn't do that as he didn't get to just be the fun parent like Jim does, because Nick has to be the only father figure in our household, whereas Jim can just be Emily's friend. Dan told me that I was being ridiculous and accused me of being a bigot, which is ludicrous. He must have said something about it to Emily as she stopped talking about Jim in our house, which I'm glad about, but she's been very frosty with us. Nick has tried to get her involved in things they can do together, but she's not showing any interest. I feel like I did have to say something, but I'm worried I went over Nick's head and made things worse and should have left him to handle it. I just want Jim to stop overstepping.
Next story.
Faced with my boyfriend's ultimatum over audiobooks, I stood my ground, now wondering if I handled it wrong. My boyfriend and I have been together for around 3 years, and we've had a pretty easygoing relationship, no big fights or anything, until now, which is why I'm questioning myself so much. So I listen to audiobooks, not erotic ones, though I do sometimes listen to the audio of NSFU videos, because as becomes important later, I have a thing for nice voices, but somehow someone just reading smut off a page feels weird for me to listen to. No judgment to anyone else, of course, just not my thing. My BF has recently gotten a bug up his butt about me listening to them, especially when he's home, even though I always use headphones and do my best not to disturb him. Also, before anyone says it, my Audible account comes directly out of my own bank account. He has no reason to think it will affect his senses. Anyway, he only ever gave little snide remarks until the latest time, so I let it go. Most recently, I had been making us dinner and cleaning up behind myself as I did it, and because he was playing video games, and I get bored doing those kinds of things without something else to think about, I turned on my favorite audiobook and picked up where I had been listening the week before. I didn't realize he was in the kitchen until he jerked the cord on my headphones and asked if I was doing it again. I asked what he was talking about, and he just sighed and said that he needed to talk to me. So we sat down, and I'll admit, I was pretty pissed he had jerked on my headphones and not super willing to listen to anything right then. Another reason I might be an AH. He said that it really bothered him when I listened to audiobooks from a man's perspective, because he knows about my voice thing and that it makes him uncomfortable. I asked why, and he said that he couldn't get it out of his head that I was thinking romantic things about the characters, and that, along with the romantic elements, made him really upset. He felt almost like I wasn't fully committed to him. I asked if he realized I was listening to a book for teens, written by a literal Mormon, and that none of the books I listened to have smut. He said that it didn't matter, and started getting angry again, which just made me angrier, and he dropped the ultimatum that he wanted me to stop, or else we would need to break up. So I was so pissed at this point that I just shrugged and said gladly, "The minute you stop watching corn videos, I'll never touch any of it again," which had him pissed, because he claimed he never said anything about videos, only the romantic and intimate parts of the books I listened to. I said that if he was allowed to make ultimatums of favorite pastimes, why can't I? And then I asked if he would rather give up video games since that's closer to what audiobooks mean to me. So he ended up just saying to forget it and went to bed, but has been pissed at me since. And I talked to my friends about the situation and got mixed answers, so I wanted to try with strangers as well. Beef wanted me to quit listening to non-sexual audiobooks, because he felt I wasn't fully committed to him, so I asked him to give something else up in return.